Imagine a world where doctors help you get healthy and not just respond to your sickness. A world where experts empower you to feel good and bring peace, joy, and love to yourself and the world. An integrative approach to health. Dr. Arlene Dijamco is on a mission to wake medicine up and raise the bar of health with her show, The MultiDimensional MD. Call 678-495-4345 to talk to her live on air, or put your comments on Facebook Live at UI Media Network with your questions, concerns, suggestions, or just to say hello. Don't forget to like and share and spread the message as she helps activate the natural healing force within all of us. Let's join Dr. Arlene Dijamco in bringing spirit back to medicine on the MultiDimensional MD.
Hi, welcome back to the MultiDimensional MD. This is your host, Dr. Arlene Dijamco. I'm an integrative physician, pediatrician, and cranial osteopath here to help you supercharge your health on all layers, including mind, body, and spirit. We have an amazing show for you today. But first, I want to tell you about a little project I'm working on that's slowly growing and that you can be a part of. It is to help with COVID-19, to help people sick with the virus and also our healthcare workers. I've been teaching over the last couple of weeks free Zoom classes on lymph pumping to help people drain inflammation from their lungs so that they can breathe better. And this is under the support of All Worlds Foundation. It's been really amazing because I've been able to teach over 100 people so far, and this is all over the United States and even overseas. So if you would like to be a part of that and help spread the word or join one of our free classes, please contact me at welcome@allworldshealth.com. That's welcome@allworlds.health.com. And this show today is really amazing. It is so timely because we're in these corona times, this cocoon time, which is really asking us to turn inwards and to address ourselves, how we're feeling, our emotions, our thoughts, and tending to our families and really helping to shine a light on areas that could use some balance. And this is an amazing opportunity that we have here. So my guest today, I was introduced to her by a mutual friend, acquaintance, and she said that we had to meet, and I'm so glad that I did meet with her. It's a psychologist, PhD, Jeannine Jannot. And Jeannine Jannot, she's the author of The Disintegrating Student, Super Smart and Falling Apart, and the founder of The Balanced Student. And I love the title of this book because I feel like it says it all. We are dealing with kids, with people, students that are gifted, that have talents, that have different kinds of smarts, and somehow they're disintegrating and falling apart. So Jeannine Jannot, she has over 20 years of experience working with children, teenagers, and young adults in both public and private school settings, spanning preschool through college. Dr. Jannot has a master's degree in school psychology from the Ohio State University and a doctorate in child and developmental psychology from the University of Connecticut. Since 2010, Dr. Jannot has been a college instructor teaching psychology courses and freshman seminars. So thank you so much. Welcome, Jeannine. Thank you for being here.
Me.
Yes, I'm so excited. And
I am too.
I want to know, just to explain, what is a disintegrating student? What does that mean?
So it's a term that I coined myself after. There was a time about 10 years ago where I had my own personal kids were in elementary school, middle school, and high school. And I started to teach college. And I had this really cool bird's eye view of this whole developmental span of what was happening with our kids in school. And I realized they were really stressed out. This is when anxiety was really ramping up in our schools for our kids. And I was really seeing my college students very much falling apart, and I was seeing the whole trajectory. And so I decided I wanted to help, and that's how I ended up doing student coaching at the Balanced Student. And where the disintegrating student comes from is a whole different type of student was showing up for coaching. I was just so surprised to see really, really bright, oftentimes gifted kids who had never had any issues at all, just easy peasy through school, didn't really study much, did their homework in class and on the bus. And they'd get their A's and everything was fine. And then all of a sudden, they literally just started falling apart. And so that's the disintegrating student. And what's happening with those kids is at various times, they end up hitting what I call a rigor tipping point. So there's a point where they were so smart that they really didn't need to put a lot of effort in.
Mm-hmm.
But when the rigor got high enough and the demands on their time and responsibilities got big enough, they start to fall apart because they never had any skills. They were so bright, they didn't need skills. So that's what I was seeing. I was seeing these really bright kids who completely fell apart. They didn't have skills, but for them, it was much more personal because they assumed that they would just always be smart. And so when they start to experience challenge and struggle, that just starts this whole series of problems with them internally and the way they think, and it starts issues with their parents, trying to figure out what's wrong. And that's a disintegrating student.
So what did it look like when they were falling apart? Like what kinds of feelings or what behaviors or what are they going through?
So specifically, it was usually a parent who would bring their child to me. And because usually what happens is when that rigor tipping point happens, the parent says, oh my gosh, what's going on? Because usually you'll see an A student start to slip. They'll start getting B's, not turning in homework, forgetting assignments, not studying. So, and a lot of it's a little bit of self-handicapping. But the parent gets concerned. They say, what's happening? And the child says, I don't know. And the thing is, they're not lying. They really don't understand what's going on. So the parents and the child end up having two different stories in their head about what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
So the parents tend to think their kids don't care anymore. My kids got lazy. They're not motivated. They don't care whether they go to college anymore. And they also will usually offer help, like, well, I'll sit down with you. I'll email your teacher. We'll get a tutor. And the student pushes back on that. So then they think because they've offered help that the student is making this choice and it's in their control to either get help or not get help. The problem is the stories going on inside our kids' head is my parents care more about my grades than they do me. They feel like they're disappointing their parents. Their biggest fear is that they're no longer smart. And they also, because they're trying to kind of protect their self-esteem as I'm a smart kid,
Mm-hmm.
they're not telling their friends. So they assume they're the only ones, when in fact it's happening to lots and lots of kids, but they're not talking about it with each other.
And I know that you had talked about some background in terms of development as the child's development in terms of their brain and the prefrontal cortex. And how does that play into what's going on, why they're not able to say they need help, or what's going on there?
So a lot of things are happening in the adolescent brain. We know all the magnificent changes that a young child goes through when they're, learning to sit up and crawl and walk and talk and do all those great things. And the brain is really spongy during that time of development, that birth to 3. But when our kids hit adolescence in puberty, which we now know, we think of adolescence as a much longer range now. We think of it more as 12 to 25. And that's because of brain research.
Mm-hmm. And I would identify with that, even just thinking about my own life. Yes, through 25.
So, and through 25. And I think, I think most people today accept that and understand our young adults are thought of a little bit differently than they were like when I was a young adult. But what's happening in the adolescent brain that's super exciting is it goes through this second spongy phase, and the brain is just ready to learn and it's absorbing all kinds of things. And we often think of hormones as being sort of that driving force that's causing teenagers to be teenagers, but it has a lot more to do with brain development. And the biggest thing that we see in our teens' behavior, in particular, when kids are going between teen years, when they're going through puberty, is that mismatch between their emotional brain or the part of kind of the oldest part of our brain, the limbic system. It's where emotions reside. We see a difference between that part of the brain and their prefrontal cortex, that part right behind our forehead. And that is the very, very, very last part of our brain to fully mature and to be fully interconnected with the rest of the brain. So that means our teenagers are super emotional because that's the strongest part of their brain. So if emotions take over, anxiety, stress, fear, it does a beat down on that prefrontal cortex, the thinking brain, because that's where judgments, decisions, attention, focus, concentration, all those kinds of things, self-regulation is in that part of the brain.
And then so when they're really stressed, it's that emotional part that starts to take the lead instead of the more logical, able to sort things out, process part of the brain, that higher thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And now we are in the middle of this pandemic and still having to deal with the same things that we had before, but in a very different time now. And what is going on now? Like, what are you seeing in terms of the disintegrating student and their families?
Well, I've been really interested in this. It's all anecdotal, of course, at this point. What I'm hearing from my kids, their friends, parents, and families I know, and just from doing, reading on the subject right now, is that motivation seems to be one of the biggest things that's an issue. So I'm hearing it from all kinds of students, that from the older elementary school age all the way through the college students I'm currently teaching, this incredible loss of motivation. And I really feel like it's stemming from a few things. We're in a high uncertainty time. And when there's high uncertainty, we as human beings feel like we have very low control. And I think that's a pretty accurate statement right now. We all have relatively low control compared to about a month ago in our lives. And it's a really challenging time. So when you put those factors together, high uncertainty, high challenge, and low control, it's hard for any of us to be ourselves and feel motivated.
And for me, it feels so much like there's more uncertainty, but really, like at any given time, there is uncertainty. It's just that we're used to a certain rhythm and routine. And when that routine's disrupted, it feels like there's so much uncertainty. And so it is an amazing time, though, to be able to address that and to start to be more comfortable with discomfort and uncertainty. And we're going to be talking more about that. And I know that you had noticed things that the parents were going through as well.
I think we parents are disintegrating too, because these circumstances are very, very challenging. So, there's always power struggles between, kids and parents. That's a given. But we're now 24/7 weeks on end together. So I think that's just amplifying. And there are a lot of stressors on parents right now. It's a very, very challenging time to be a parent. So I think, when I talk to parents now, my advice to them is not about their kids. It's really about them. Because again, we're looking at control. They need to consider the things that they have control over and, the choices they can make for themselves.
Yes, and we are going to talk a lot more about that in just a little bit after a short break. So I want to just say hello to friends at WDJY 99.1 FM and hello friends from WTTA 101.2 FM in Kentucky and Ohio. If you have questions or would like to say hello, please call 678-495-4345. We'll be right back on the MultiDimensional MD. This is your host, Dr. Arlene Dijamco, talking to PhD psychologist Jeannine Jannot on the disintegrating student, super smart and falling apart.
At Heiser Orthodontics, we understand that your smile is a big deal for both kids and adults. We have the latest technology and state-of-the-art equipment. But honestly, What makes us unique is our patient experience, and we are not the only people saying this.
Heiser Orthodontics is amazing.
Superb.
Trustworthy. Compassionate.
A friendly place where they know what they're doing, and that's what I like about it.
We are a family-owned private practice where kids are valued, parents have a voice, and the entire Heiser team puts the patient first. Discover the Heiser Orthodontics difference. Call 470-330-9083 for a free consultation today.
Hi, this is Dr. Arlene Dijamco. You are watching the MultiDimensional MD. I'm here with my guest, PhD psychologist Jeannine Jannot. We're talking about the disintegrating student, super smart and falling apart. And so we were just talking about power struggles, and I think that warrants more discussion because families are stuck at home, quarantined all together, and it's what I'm hearing over and over again from friends, from patients is, what do I do? I don't know what to do with these battles. Which ones do I pick? What do I do? I don't have a break. So what can you tell us?
Well, I would say, specifically during this challenging time where we're home with our families, there is all this uncertainty with for how long and what comes next. That I would love to give parents permission to throw out the parenting handbook, at least temporarily.
Yes, I agree.
It's just going to be very unrealistic to try to live up to the standards that we may have set for ourselves as parents. So, maybe you have rules around screen time or, other things in your family, and they're becoming these places where the fights, the power struggles are breaking out over. I think it's time to, maybe reevaluate a set of maybe house rules or family rules during this time. And you can even take them week by week. This is just such a critical time for communication.
So what would you do?
Regardless of the age of your children.
What would you do, especially with screen time, since you had mentioned that?
Well, a lot of the kids who are in school are going to need to be on screens for school. So here's my concern around screens. There are probably more kids than not, particularly middle school and high school and young adults in college, who use their screens as their escape, as their way to self-regulate, as their way to calm themselves. So if you have a child who uses their screen in that way, so maybe it's playing a game, maybe it's communicating somehow with their peers, to take that away and to make that a power struggle is going to just further their stress and frustration and make all the feels bigger for them, which is, it's going to be very hard for them to function well in that state. So again, I think this requires a conversation, and to bring our kids, if they're old enough and developmentally able to have the conversation with us about, well, what do you want? What would you want if you had the,
Absolutely.
You could make the rules.
I love that.
And then you talk about what your concerns are, and then you come together. Again, we're talking about control. We're giving some of that control back to our kids and saying, I want to know what you think. Here's my concern. What can we do? And it might just be, again, if we're just sort of shifting our ideals a little bit, maybe we just look at, okay, we're going to spend 30 or 40 minutes this time of day together as a family. You and I are going to have one-on-one time this time of day before bed. Whatever it is that works for the family, that you're not 100% everybody on their screens all the time. And I would also suggest to parents that, our superpower is doing what we want to see our kids do. I call it living out loud. So if you don't want your kids on screens all the time, that's a rough call if they see you on your screens all the time. So that's something to consider. So again, that gives the parent control in that situation. They can decide what they do.
And what you said, having a conversation, is really validating for both sides. So to be able to talk to your kid about what their concerns about the screen time are and what balance would feel like for them and what their opinion of it is. And then it gives you an opportunity to also voice your emotions, opinions, and to bring it together to find some sort of balance there. And again, we're just going to toss out the rule book for now because I know what the American Academy of Pediatrics says, and right now is not the time. This is a very special moment in history that we're dealing with. So to be able to honor it and bring that conversation to light is really a great opportunity to learn with each other and grow together.
Absolutely.
And you had mentioned just motivation was lacking for students right now. And I had read in your book that difference between internal and external motivation. So what would you say? Do bribes work?
Bribes do not work. And we all as parents know they don't work. And what we do typically when they don't work is we just up the bribe a little bit and, hey, maybe this will work instead. They just tend not to work. They tend not to work for human beings in general.
And why is that?
So the difference, so intrinsic motivation or internal motivation is doing something for yourself for reasons important to you. So if you think of somebody who's you describe as a lifelong learner, they're intrinsically motivated. So the idea that they are learning something new, getting a new skill, reading a book, doing whatever it is, they're doing it because they enjoy it and it's meaningful to them.
It's fun to learn.
Ideally, we want all our learning to be that way. And when we're really, really young, that is the way it works. But slowly we are kind of curated to respond to the external things that motivate us. So external rewards would be things like praise. So, hearing good things about yourself or hearing that you're so smart and so awesome or such a great athlete. Money, grades. So these are all really common things that a paycheck, as adults, that's externally motivating. I will go to work because I would like to receive that paycheck. The problem is what the research tells us, if we take somebody's something that they're already intrinsically motivated about, and we add on external awards, so we shift it to that intrinsic type of motivation, then it loses its fun. It loses its value for the person. It doesn't become meaningful. So if you think about school, that's often what's happening to our kids by the time they're in third, fourth grade, you could see that intrinsic motivation just starting to go down and down and down, and learning is not fun anymore. I'll give you an example with my daughter. She's a writer. She loves to write. She's been writing since she was wee little, and she's a junior in high school now. And there have been times where there's been competitions, like writing competitions. And I've said, hey, why don't you enter this? Why don't you? And the pushback is tremendous. There is no way she wants to do that because she's like, that would not be fun. That would ruin it for me. So that's an example of kind of holding on to that intrinsic motivation.
Yes. And what do you think is going on with that? The inner dialogue with the kids in terms of why does it create anxiety?
Well, most of the kids I see, the ones in particular that I would call disintegrating students, have what's called a fixed mindset. So Carol Dweck has a great book called Mindset, and it goes into great detail on the difference between a fixed and growth mindset. But simply put, it's how we think about our ability, our intellect in particular. So it's about if you feel like it can, if it can grow. So growth mindset, we assume that our ability to learn is limitless. We love challenges. We'll put in effort into things. We'll look at people who are successful and think, wow, I want to try what they're doing and get better at this thing. But what I'm seeing is a lot of the opposite of that, the fixed mindset. So these are the kids or adults, anybody can have a fixed mindset, but I'm seeing it in the students who they have so self-identified as being smart that when they see that that's being threatened, they feel like that's as smart as they could be. So if I'm starting to get information that's telling me I'm not as smart as I thought I would, they feel like that's a permanent state. So
like
they
if you
will
don't
start
do well
to
on a test, then now I'm no longer smart
Yes.
because I did not do well on a test, which is not always
exactly.
true. Yes.
And and it's the problem with it too is that they avoid challenges. So they start this self-handicapping, self-protecting, so and even self-sabotaging. So they will avoid challenges because if it looks like I'm not going to be like really awesome at this, or I'm not going to get the A on that, I'm just not going to try. And they don't like feedback. Actually, there's studies that look at the brains of students with fixed mindset and growth mindset, and they give them a challenging task. And after the task, they give them feedback on how they did. And the students with the fixed mindset, their brain's pretty much just dark. It just goes dark when they're given that feedback.
Right.
And the growth mindset kids, they get the feedback and their brains just lighten up all over the place because they're trying to learn from it. They looked at it as more of a challenge. So our fixed mindset kids, they're going to avoid challenges. They're going to shy away from effort. In their heads, part of this internal dialogue is, all those kids who had to put in effort and who were trying so hard, they weren't very smart. So if I have to try now, that means I'm not smart.
Right. Which is during these Corona times, it's very trying or challenging. And so if we could look at it more from a growth mindset where we have an opportunity to be creative, it's an exciting challenge, even though very difficult, that we can look at things in different ways than we have in the past. And that would be a much easier way to go through these Corona times versus in quarantine versus a fixed mindset where, well, if I don't get the feedback that I need to feel good, then I'm no good.
Right. But they'll externalize that and they'll say, it's the teacher's fault. It's the having to do it online.
So that's important to know. Yeah, they're not able to actually explain it necessarily, but so it gets pushed off to the side like it's somebody else's fault.
It's protecting their self-esteem because they're smart kids. And so instead of admitting that they're struggling and need help, which they do not like to do, they will look for the outside places, the external places to place the blame. So that's why a kid might sound really negative, it's everybody's fault. It's not my fault. It's everybody else's fault.
Well, this is so important for parents to understand because then when your kids are feels like they're attacking you, then you can feel more compassionate about where they're coming from, that they are not real. They're really just trying to protect themselves and how they feel about themselves, and to realize where they need help. That it's just that just because something's difficult doesn't make them not worthwhile. Doesn't mean that they're not smart. Doesn't mean that they can't do it. It just needs maybe a different approach, that you can still have to try or have to do something difficult, have to go through a challenge, and let that be an opportunity for growth, for creativity. Absolutely. Maybe even have some fun with it.
And the really good news is that for disintegrating students, if I can, or if a parent can help them understand, that growth mindset, and you can usually find it in something that, your child is interested in. So maybe it's a sport. So they probably take coaching very well from the sport that they love, and they probably put effort in and they enjoy the challenge, all the things. So that's growth mindset. And so what I try to do with the students I work with is find a place where they have a growth mindset and compare it to how they think about school so they can kind of get it. It's like, see how that's missing over here. And
to spread the fun out to other parts of the life.
Really fabulous news that but the really good news is it's not that they're not smart anymore. They just don't have certain skills. That's all it is. It's like, okay, I'm just going to tell you what the skills are.
So this is all great news.
Pretty much
yes.
that.
And we're going to keep talking about this more after this quick break. And we're going to talk about what you can do as parents too. So I'd love to connect with you online. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at All Worlds Health, and the UI Media Network via UI Media Network. Also, all my online courses at allworldshealthacademy.com. MultiDimensionalMD.com are on mega sale, 50 to 83% off until April 20th, including EFT tapping for parents and kids to de-stress, kids meditation, 21 simple exercises to relax, reset, and rejuvenate. Thanks for watching. This is Dr. Arlene Dijamco talking to psychologist Jeannine Jannot. We are going to talk more about disintegrating parent as well as a disintegrating student.
Download the UI Media Smart app at uimediaapp.com to watch and listen to all your favorite shows anytime from anywhere in the world. Shows that enrich, entertain, educate, and feeds the conscious cells throughout your body. We bring you never heard before topics in health, inspiration, music, psychics, numerology, current affairs, controversies, and much, much more. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.uimediaapp.com and start raising your frequency now.
Hi, welcome back to the MultiDimensional MD. This is Dr. Arlene Dijamco talking to psychologist Jeannine Jannot about the disintegrating student. And now we're also going to talk about the disintegrating parent. We've been talking about internal versus external motivation, power struggles, and how to talk to your kids. So how can you build trust together?
So that's such an important thing that we do as parents. It's probably one of the more challenging things, and the heavy lifting, it's up to us. So we can't wait necessarily for our kids to come to us and say, let's have a talk about how we feel about these things or what should be happening. So, there's a lot of things that feed into the communication piece, but there's a few that are absolutely just critical. And one is giving our attention, our undivided attention to our kids.
Yes.
That is now a gift.
Absolutely.
That we can not only give our kids, but we give to anyone. And I think we struggle with that.
And it's really interesting because we're in this quarantine, so we're all together all the time. So you would think that would be easier. But what I'm seeing in different families, and then I see it in my own family sometimes, is that we're all together, but we're maybe busy doing different things and together, but not together sometimes. And so to be conscious of bringing the presence, that gift.
And a lot of it's just habit. The habit of, if I'm bored for a second and I get on my phone or do something like that, and then somebody starts talking to us and we don't necessarily disengage from what we're doing on our phone. So it's just something to be mindful of when you're having these conversations, to try to give your undivided attention. And as parents, just to be really harsh, we need to shut up and listen. Because honestly, our kids, sometimes they go off on things, and we are problem solvers. That is what we do. That is, we've been problem solvers since they were born. And as our kids get older and older, oftentimes they want to talk to us, and they do not want us to solve their problems. They just want us to listen. So active listening, hearing what they're saying. If your child's going off on a tirade, to not necessarily, to definitely hear what they're saying, but to listen between the lines. What's driving this? You sound so angry right now, but maybe if you're listening really closely, you can hear there's disappointment, that's really behind this. They're disappointed about something. Maybe they're fearful about something. So not necessarily taking everything at face value, but we can only do that if we're listening really carefully, and that we're not trying to interject and, well, you just need to do this. Well, if you only do this, well, I think you should do this.
Yeah, and that presence gives them some space to hold whatever they're feeling, and to honor it and to recognize it. And what you said was that the older kids may not be asking for it anymore like the younger kids do. And even just today, my little ones, they were like, "Mommy, you keep putting off playing with us outside. What if you kept putting off your work? What would that be like?" And I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is terrible." So to prioritize and bring those precious moments up in the priority, and so that you tend to them. And then for the older kids to carve out time in the day to listen and to just have space with them.
And it also helps, build trust if we we notice the good things our kids do all the time. But we spent most of our lives as parents correcting, telling a different way, trying to help. We forget oftentimes to say out loud the good things our kids do, the things we appreciate about them, the things we notice. A lot of that goes unsaid. So that can really help strengthen a relationship. It also helps to know what triggers us as parents. So if there's certain things that our children say or do that sets us off again, that's something we can have control over. But it takes some being vulnerable as a parent to allow yourself to say, this is just something that just triggers me, and figure out how you're going to respond when that happens. Because sometimes kids will trigger us just to send us off the scent of something else. It's an interesting thing.
And so how would you respond? You get triggered, they say something. How would you respond?
So sometimes we're going to respond the way we respond when we get triggered. So we might yell back. We might get defensive. I think defensive is kind of my go-to, like explaining, whatever it is that's triggered me. But I think the biggest thing we can do if we can't stop ourselves short of having that response is to circle back and say, oh, sorry about that. I wish I had responded differently. And to say, why did that trigger? When you talk like that, it makes me feel blank. It makes me feel angry. It makes me feel scared. Whatever it is, it's that vulnerability piece, because our kids will respect that, because they'll see us as people too. It's like, oh, you get scared. Oh, you get triggered too. I think that's really healthy for our kids to see. I mean, if we're modeling that for our kids, then they're going to be better at
owning
it
your own behavior, and then your kids will see that they can do the same. So maybe they can be erratic or get mad or yell, and then to come back around and say like, hey, this is what I was feeling, and to be able to have a conversation after that.
And there's a lot less damage done, if you can do that, instead of, kind of everybody goes to their corners and feels bad. And those are the hard conversations sometimes to come back to. And I have parents ask me a lot of times, well, what do I do for my kid who doesn't talk? They're not a talker. They don't want to have the conversations. And I have always found that a really good workaround for that is to write a note. And I actually like the idea of getting like a little notebook and writing something to that child. Like if there's a concern, there's a really tough conversation you want to have that it's just not happening in real life, you write it down and you put it someplace where only that kid will see it. Their pillow, the bathroom sink, someplace that they'll see it, but nobody else would. And then give them time, let them read it, let them digest it. And I've used this with one of my own children, and, we will do this back and forth, in their own time. And I think, you can take the emotion out of the conversation at a better degree when we have a lot more control, because you're thinking carefully about what you're saying instead of blowing up.
And that vulnerability that you had said before is a piece of that. So whether you say it or you write it out, you're recognizing your own vulnerability in the situation, and then as well as your kids. And so you can somehow become more in resonance with each other by recognizing and acknowledging each other's feelings and where they're coming from. And you had said something about this 90-second rule, which I thought was a neat thing to keep in mind. And what is that? And what does it have to do with cortisol?
Well, it's kind of game changing when you have tweens and teens. So, when our nervous system gets triggered into, the emotional reaction of fear, usually we feel under a threat. Our cortisol is one of the main chemicals that's just like ramping up big time in our body and in our brain. And so take, for example, if I walked outside of my room right now and my daughter was standing on the other side and she jumped out at me, and that would send my nervous system into that response, because it's a threat. It's like, oh my gosh, something bad, something unexpected is happening, and I have to assess it. Is this threatening? Is this somebody attacking me? just my daughter playing a trick on me.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless, I mean, my brain's going to figure that out, but my body, if it's reacted, which it would, and all that cortisol goes shooting through my body, that takes 90 seconds to calm down. And I always like to think of it as like a snow globe. You know, how you shake a snow globe and you've got all the snow that circulates around for a little while and it takes a while to settle. It's the same thing with those chemicals that are causing that reaction. They take 90 seconds to settle down. So what that means for parents is if you know this, if your child starts going off the deep end and they're yelling and they're just, kind of losing it, do not engage, because that will just keep it going. You want to wait for at least that minute and a half to allow the snow to settle so that you can have a conversation.
For both of you, huh?
Again, this is, yes. Well, you don't want to get triggered as well, right? Because then you're just escalating back and forth, and that's how you get big blow ups.
And it reminds me.
I handled this with my.
No, I was just going to say, it reminds me of something that you said, well, for the development of a kid's brain or through adolescence is that the limbic or emotional brain is just really on supercharge. And so when we're triggered, it's then our emotional centers go on supercharge and kind of take over from the higher processing brain. And I like that idea of like, let the snow settle in the snow globe and then respond. So you can respond from higher functioning centers versus like this instinctive survival fight or flight response.
Exactly. And one of the other things to know about the teenage brain that's sort of interesting is the adolescent brain does not do a great job of discerning emotional faces. So an adolescent brain compared to an adult brain tends to see neutral faces, surprised faces, angry faces as all being angry. So you can say, and I notice this all the time with my kids when they were younger. I say something like, take out the garbage when you get a chance or something like that. And it'd be like, oh my gosh, why are you so mad at me? Why are you yelling at me? What's right? And be like, what? I just said, would you take out the trash? But that kind of jumping to, oh my gosh, that's such a angry way that you're talking to me when in fact we're not. And then if we as parents get defensive, I wasn't yelling at you, but now I am because you're being disrespectful. But understanding that their brain is not good. It just goes right to the angry and the threat. And it's just not reading it correctly.
So the understanding just helps so much.
Maturity.
Yeah, but the understanding helps so much because then you can say, "Oh, I'm sorry, sweetheart. I didn't mean for it to come off that way." But diffuse it.
I just tell my kids all this stuff too. So I would tell them about the 90 seconds. I would tell them about, you're probably going to misread my facial cues and I'm not going to engage with you. So giving our kids this information is really game changing too, because they sometimes feel like they're just going crazy. It's like, oh my gosh, I just totally went off the deep end. I have no idea why. Well, it's your brain. But it's a short term, characteristic of the adolescent brain, and their brain matures and everything gets a little better over time.
So that's neat. So both understanding from both sides, whether it's your teenager, college student, whatever age, that they can look at themselves, kind of like turn it back on themselves and say, hey, this is okay. I'm going through something. I'm growing. I'm developing. I'm learning new things. And if I have these outbursts, it's okay. So that's a great thing for us to tell ourselves as parents and for also to acknowledge for our kids. They're going to take another brief sponsor break here. And thank you so much for watching. This is Dr. Arlene Dijamco, the MultiDimensional MD. And discover the Heiser orthodontics difference where they genuinely care about you and your child. Visit heiserortho.com or call 470-330-9083 for a free consultation today. Remember to visit www.uimedianetwork.org to keep up to date with our events, programs, and hosting possibilities. This is Dr. Arlene Dijamco. You're watching and listening to the MultiDimensional MD. After this quick break, we'll keep talking to psychologist Jeannine Jannot about concrete ways to address stress and more for the disintegrating student and disintegrating parent.
This is Kurt Arsenault of Arsenault Advisory Group. Most of us never think we'll get divorced. Unfortunately, half of marriages will end in divorce. Children are always the first priority, but getting your finances in order will need to be addressed. The first step is to get an assessment of where you are financially. Will you keep your home? Do one or both of you have a 401k or pension? Who will pay for the kids' college education? Will you split your debt liabilities? These are just a few things to consider when thinking about divorce. Visit arsenaladvisory.com and download our free ebook titled 6 Things to Do Before You Get Divorced. Don't wait. Visit arsenaladvisory.com today.
Hi, welcome back. This is Dr. Arlene Dijamco, the MultiDimensional MD, talking to my guest, psychologist Jeannine Jannot. And she wrote this book, The Disintegrating Student, Super Smart and Falling Apart. And we're going to keep talking about concrete ways to address stress. And if you don't know, in her book, she's got 77 different ways in the back there. So tell us, what are some of your favorite ways to really address the stress that people are going through in this quarantine time?
So I think one of the most helpful things is to rethink what stress means.
Mm-hmm.
So first of all, to understand that when we feel stressed, that's our body's way of kind of signaling to us, sort of the alarm goes off and the lights flash and says, hey, pay attention. This thing is important to you. So whatever the stressor is, and for students, a lot of times it can be tests. So students might have test anxiety. So what I'm trying to explain to them is, well, the stress response is actually being very helpful to you. It's giving you information to pay attention because something's important to you. And then what I also tell them is that there's more than one type of stress response that we have. So we have the fight or flight response, which we all understand, and that's the response we have when we feel threatened. It's a really awesome stress response to save our life. We can act quickly. We have tons of energy. We can, fight or flee. But the problem with that is if we're chronically in that fight or flight threat of fight or flight stress response.
Yep.
Sorry, forgetting my words there. Yes, thank you. If we're constantly in that state, then our body, it's not very healthy. Our immune system, because we're diverting resources away from some of those other systems that aren't needed in our saving our life. So the immune system, for example, becomes compromised. So the problem is everybody thinks that stress is bad because of that. And the thing that people don't understand is there's a couple more stress responses. There's the challenge stress response, which is when you're standing over a 3-foot putt for millions of dollars, or you're getting ready to make a free throw for the game. When we can use our stress to help us perform better, that's actually a really healthy stress response. And we also have a stress response for sort of the species survival. So it's called tend and befriend. And oxytocin, which is the hormone that actually bonds us and makes connection happen, that's actually part of our stress response. And that's what pushes us to when we're under a really tremendous stress, like the tornadoes that went through recently. Like right now, if we have somebody who we're worried about, if we go and help them, that is our stress response pushing us to help others and to be helped. A person who jumps into in front of a train to pull somebody out, they're using that stress response. So we have these two really healthy, helpful stress responses.
Yeah, this is such an integrative approach to health overall, because it's seeing the health and encouraging the health, nourishing it, versus seeing the disease. So you're talking about, okay, where's the health in stress versus all looking at stress is bad, try to get rid of it. It's why do we are experiencing that stress, and what can we do with it? What can we cultivate in our lives so that we can use this response in a healthy way to get us through whatever we're going through?
Absolutely. And that whole idea that we want stress to be gone. And most people would say, sign me up. Yeah. I don't want stress. If you don't have stress in your life, you don't have meaning in your life. Mm-hmm. Think of the things that stress you out the most. Your family, your friends, and your work, or however you're productive. So school for kids. Take those things away, those are the things that you get up for in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you wake up because you love your friends, you love your family, and you feel good about being productive. So without stress in our lives, we take all the meaning out of it. The key to this, and it's so simple, and it really aligns really well with what you practice. It's all about what's in our head that really dictates what stress response we're using, because they all feel the same. So if I'm in fight or flight because somebody just jumped out and scared me, or if I'm in the challenge response, like I'm sitting here talking to you, using my stress to help me have a conversation with you, that all has to do with what I say in my head. So if I sat down to talk to you, oh my God, I'm petrified. This is going to be terrible. We're going to lose our connection. Oh my gosh, my gosh, my gosh. And that's what students do when they sit down to take tests oftentimes. I go right into, fight or flight, and I'm not going to do my best. But if I say, hey, I'm excited to have this conversation. This is important to me. That's a whole different, and the physiology that follows those thoughts is different. And healthy versus not healthy.
It's a pivot because you see what you recognize. You have that mindful awareness to how you're feeling at the moment, maybe what the trigger is. And then once you acknowledge it and accept yourself for where you are, that you realize that you're okay, and then you pivot it and reframe it in a way that's healthier. And so, it's really amazing when you can bring that awareness to it. Makes all the difference. And
it's all about mindset.
Yeah. Your mindset is everything.
Mindset really is everything.
Because when you pivot that, then you make it more about the health and that loving yourself. The reason, like what you said, the reason why you care about anything, the reason why you're stressed about anything is because you care. Whether it's you love yourself, you love your family, your friends, whatever, what your passion is, your mission for life. And when we realize that, oh, okay, so this is not a negative thing. It's propelling us to be able to fulfill whatever we want to do, whether it's connecting with other people. And I'm seeing that with this, there's all these groups popping up and they're calling it the kindness pandemic. So amidst this viral pandemic, there's a kindness pandemic, and people are helping neighbors and friends, or people, they're helping strangers that they don't even know. They're paying it forward. I've heard so many stories of people like just buying other people's groceries, or lending a hand, helping an elderly neighbor. It's amazing. It's like, and that's the opportunity in this stressful time where we can pivot it and shift the mindset and make it something really beautiful and loving, where we make that connection.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not about putting a positive spin on anything. It's about finding meaning in whatever is happening.
That's true, because it's not there is a lot of suffering. And so if we feel the stress, it's because we feel for other people and we feel for ourselves, or if people have gotten sick. And it's not about ignoring that at all, but stepping into that compassion and seeing what we can do with it.
It's really healthy for us.
So we can all rise to that challenge together, and that's like rise with this growth mindset that we can do difficult things, and we can help one another, and you can have peace in your family and get through difficult emotions. So it's not just the happy, joyful times, but that you can get through difficult times together. So it's been really amazing. Again, this is Dr. Jeannine Jannot's book. I would highly recommend it. She's been getting a lot of press for it, and we've talked about so many amazing things here about what motivates people, intrinsic versus extrinsic, and how we can talk to our kids, how we can build trust, how we can diffuse power struggles, and how we can identify our own triggers and what to do with that. So we are about coming to the end, but any last words that you'd like to say?
Good luck. No. I just want parents to, if they're parents listening, to say, your superpower is to model what you want to see in your kids. So, you have control over what you do, what you say, what you're trying to do. If you want to work on a growth mindset, do it out loud. Tell your kids when you're struggling. Tell them, share your failures, your mistakes with them. Show them how to do it. Telling them what to do usually backfires. Modeling what you'd like to see in them almost always works.
So it's okay to stumble and to get back up
Great
again.
To stumble.
Yes. They could be your stepping stone instead of the obstacles. And if we trip and fall, we can show our kids how we can get back up again. It's not how many times you fall. It's just about getting back up again. And that's,
they need to know that. So they need to know they can make mistakes. They're still going to be loved. They can fail and they're still going to be okay. And I think our youngest generation of kids really needs more lessons around that to feel safe.
Mm-hmm. And to do that for yourself as well. So bring the awareness in, acknowledge your own feelings, and then pivot from there and create what you want with an awareness, with being okay to fall and get back up again. So thank you so much for joining us for this amazing episode of the MultiDimensional MD. Thank you so much, Jeannine, for being here with us today. It's been very fascinating. Pleasure. Yeah, I learned so much, and I'm so glad to have you as a new friend. So just a couple announcements. Hey guys, do catch up with sassy Jacqueline Grund on the Meza Live show next Thursday at 4 p.m. EST, where she's going to interview Executive Director of Peach, Michelle Melnick. And don't forget to tune in 2 weeks on Wednesday, April 29th, 4 p.m. EST with my guest, the amazing mom, Ironman, and professional photographer, Kate Parker, with her international photo books. I know you've seen them out there. Strong is the New Pretty, Heart of a Boy, and Play Like a Girl. This will be on the MultiDimensional MD. Lots of love and big air hugs to all of you. Thank you so much for watching my show, the MultiDimensional MD. I'll see you next time.
Wow. What a show! I feel great already. Don't you all look at health in a whole new light now? If you do, please don't forget to like, comment, and share the show. And you can also watch all of Dr. Arlene's shows on uimediaapp.com. Catch her live every other Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern on WDJY 99.1 FM in Atlanta, Facebook Live, Spreaker, and almost all the podcasting platforms at UI Media Network. You can also write to her at contact@uimedianetwork.org with your questions, concerns, and comments. Like Hippocrates says, everyone has a doctor in him or her. We just have to help it in its work, and Dr. Arlene is here to do just that. The United Intentions Foundation and its associates take no responsibility for the opinions and statements made by the talk show hosts or their guests.